NABJ family, this is your president, Erin Haynes, and I am coming to you today because I want to talk to you. NABJ family, this is your president, Erin Haynes, and I am coming to you today because I want to talk to you. Black families out here and trying to figure out what we're seeing these layoffs. What we're seeing is not just a series of isolated events. It is a transformation of how journalism works and what a career in our field looks like now. I know for many of you, this is transformation. So I want to say this clearly. And what this is not a reflection of your career now. This is not a reflection of your value. What's happening right now is a shift in our industry and how to sort of support as you are navigating that. So that's why today I want to announce that we are expanding NABJ Cares. So we're launching resources to help you right now. That's going to be a career hub that's going to help with job and freelance opportunities, programming that's going to help you navigate layoffs and build sustainable income and partnerships to support you, whether you stay in the newsroom that you're currently in or build something of your own or find your next newsroom. Look, we know that there is no longer just one path in journalism. NABJ has to support you across all of those paths. We're not just responding to this moment, we are being thoughtful about what comes next. And so if you have been impacted, I want you to know that we are here for you and we are building for you. And so if you have been impacted, I want you to know that we are here for you and we are building for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bené Wilson. I'm the training director at Investigative Reporters and Editors. I'm the moderator for this panel. I want to commend President Haynes for this initiative. She reached out to me and asked me if I would take this task on, and I said yes unhesitatingly because I've been laid off twice in the past 2 years. I'm a longtime freelancer, and I was blessed enough to reach out to 3 of my good friends who all have unique experiences being independent journalists. So I'm going to start with Shanae. If you could just introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Shanae Williams. I'm a Baltimore-based independent journalist. I'm also the chair of NABJ's Entrepreneurship Task Force, which is considering a merge with the Freelance Task Force, which has been quiet for a while. So this is right up my alley because as a freelancer, you are an entrepreneur. So just want to remind you. But I started my journalism career in traditional news outlets locally. First at a Baltimore newspaper, then traveled to the South and Northeast as a TV news reporter, producer, and anchor. And then I started a family. And now for the past about 10 years, I've been working as a freelancer, and much of that was full-time as a freelancer. But when I think about it, I really have been freelancing throughout my career and didn't really even think about it, even in college. I've found opportunities specifically as a writer, whether it's writing obituaries, press releases, TV scripts. And with our industry right now, I am just passionate about sharing my experiences, best practices, and giving advice for anyone who is looking to figure out how to use their skills and expertise and to create a business out of it.
Thank you. Denise. Are you on mute?
Good evening, NABJ. I'm Denise Clay Murray. I am a longtime freelancer. I've been freelancing full-time since 2005. And actually, I don't call myself a freelancer. I call myself an independent journalist because I met entirely too many people who got stuck on the free part. And that's one thing that I'm hoping that we can, kind of communicate to you tonight, the fact that there is a process to all of this. I started out in specifically the Black press. I wrote for the Philadelphia Tribune for the first part of my career before going on to other newspapers and radio stations and different things. And now, in addition to doing my own stuff, which I cover politics for several news organizations here in Philadelphia. I also co-own a radio and television show called Philadelphia Hall Monitor. And if that sounds familiar to you, it's because for the last couple of years, myself and one of my partners in Hall Monitor have been coming to NABJ and doing a workshop on how to create your own business as part of the convention. We're not going to be able to do that this year because, believe it or not, he's going to go to a hobo convention. So Don't ask me about that. But I'm glad to be here tonight. And thank you, Benet, for organizing this. And thank you, NABJ, for taking this seriously because there's a lot of people without jobs right now. And if we can somehow manage to continue to communicate the information that our community needs on our own, then we're in business.
Johnny.
Hi there. I'm Jonathan Franklin. I'm a Washington, D.C. based journalist, reporter, producer. Worked in radio, worked in television. I've had many lives in journalism, I like to say. So I've worked in print, worked in television, radio. I'm currently, freelancing for a couple outlets, but also working full time. Adjunct professor. So have many multiple streams of income, which is the foundation of being a freelance or independent journalist. You have to have multiple streams of income because, fortunately, the bills don't pay themselves. So you have to sort of know how to have that hustle. And there's many ways to freelance while also working full time. So depending on, especially with the broadcast side, there's like rules and stipulations which you can do certain things. So obviously we'll go more in depth with that. But yeah, definitely was freelancing in college, freelancing and while I got my master's at Georgetown was able to sort of, I didn't really realize it was freelancing. I was like, oh, like this is a job. I'm, reporting, I'm able to produce, but it actually was really sort of freelancing. So being able to sort of have that sense of editorial freedom without being bound by a contract was pretty nice. But there's, multiple ways to get around that, which we'll, get into it during the panel.
Yeah, I fell into freelancing. I call myself the accidental freelancer because when I got laid off from my this for the second time in my career, um, all the competitors to the publication I was writing to reached out and asked me to freelance for them. So, that's how I fell into it. But I'm a big Marvel fan and I love a good origin story. So I wanted to ask the three of you, how and why did you decide to become an independent journalist? And then what were the signs that you saw that felt it was the right moment to do it?
I would say, well, I guess I'll go first. I would say, um, well, I guess when I was freelancing in general in college, so I wrote for my campus newspaper. I was involved in my campus television station, so I had again that hustle within the campus. But at one of my internships, worked for intern at the local news station in the Greenville, Spartanburg, Asheville market, and that ended up translating into a part-time job and part-time freelance basis. So it's like, hey, well, if you ever have some time in your class schedule, come over and do some digital content producing for the station. I was like, okay, it was more money, it was a check. And in college, you're thinking, every little bit counts, every little bit of money counts. So I was like, okay, yeah, more money for me. I can add that to whatever I want to spend on. But the freelance hustle started when I was in grad school. Master's in broadcast and digital media at Georgetown, and was able to really saying, hey, like I need to pay these bills. I'm also trying to have a journalism undergrad degree, so putting it to use while still sharpening the tools and sharpening the skills to put them back in the toolbox and to use them post graduation. So I was freelancing for a couple outlets. I was writing for a couple places. I really, again, saw the signs, saw the writing on the wall, mainly because one, needed to pay the bills, but also two, at the time back in 2016, 20, I'm sure we were in the same program. So we sort of saw like it was the evolution that things were sort of changing. We kept hearing like television's dying and radio's dying and print is dying. It's like, no, it's not dying. It's just evolving. Like print, digital, television, streaming, radio, podcasts. So things were starting to evolve. And so you have to sort of be, I like to use the phrase, like not a one trick pony. So you have to know how to do a little bit of everything. And we were taught that in school, having to do those things. So really putting the skills in real time that we were learning at Georgetown and being able to apply them to internships. And I had an internship while in my last semester of J school that ended up turning into a freelance opportunity. There was like, hey, you're so good, why don't you want to stick around and freelance? I said, sure, yes, I'll do it, pay my bills. So those opportunities really came into life based off of me interning and just knowing people and also reaching out to people in my Rolodex saying, hey, like I looking for opportunities or hey, I'm, my last semester of school. Is there any chance I can freelance for you all? And being able to sort of have those experiences and those clips really helped me land my first full-time job, which was in Baltimore back in 2016. 2017. So I was able to still get fresh clips while also still gaining that experience for the full-time job.
And it was similar. I remember under my undergrad time, I was on Craigslist. I don't even think that's a thing anymore. Do we still have Craigslist? I don't know. But I was on Craigslist looking for writing gigs and just opportunities. And so, like I said, I was writing for this site called memorial.com. So they paid me just to write obituaries of just people that I knew, celebrities, anybody. So I just found opportunities. And so again, I didn't think of it as freelancing. I'm just trying to bring in some money, trying to get some experience as a writer. And so that's how I would recommend looking at it. And so it wasn't until I left. So I did do the traditional route for a while, full time, as I said, in local TV news. And then I found out that I was having a child and I'm in Portland, Maine, and my soon to be husband and everybody's in Baltimore. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? So I left. And as a part of my termination agreement, it said that I couldn't work in Baltimore at a TV station for 2 years. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? And then I, looked back at my relationships that I had built with the Afro newspaper, my first job, and I reached out to them. Do you need some support? And that's really how I got into freelancing. And then that was around the time that people were starting to talk about it in that way. And then that's when I started to hear about independent journalism. I'm like, oh, I gravitate to this word. Um, so yeah, and I also think it's important to differentiate too, because freelancing can be anything, right? That's literally a self-employed person who makes money from working with other organizations, and that's a freelancer. And so, of course, you're also an independent journalist if you're doing journalistic work, but not all independent journalists are freelancers, right? Because we have the independent journalists who are creating their own platforms. They're not working with other outlets. They're getting revenue from their membership. So I have, yeah, so I just remember starting to see independent journalism come up and I started to identify with it and started to explore entrepreneurship as a whole. And I actually went to Georgetown with Jonathan, but I was in a different program. So I was in their public relations and corporate communications program because I said, okay, I don't know about getting a journalism degree. Let me try something adjacent. So I also recommend that as well because I can just expand your mind to all the different opportunities. Content marketing, you can make some money with that.
Well, I had been in the business for like 15 years when I decided to go independent. And being in the business for 15 years was kind of why I decided to. Because I was looking at newsrooms from being in the middle of a newsroom. And at the last full-time newsroom gig I had, I'm looking around and I'm seeing all of these extremely unhappy people. And like, on the one hand, I want to tell stories. Specifically, I want to tell stories from that are of benefit to my community. I want to make sure, and I make no apologies for this. I want to make sure that Black people have all the information they need to make the best decisions they can about politics, economics, and just life overall. And I knew I couldn't do that at the place I was currently working. And I also knew that I couldn't stay there anymore because it was becoming an extremely toxic environment. So I started looking at, going independent, then. Then I started to notice in the early 2000s that newspapers were laying off people like in bunches. And I'm thinking, okay, they're laying off people in bunches, which means there are going to be fewer jobs as people are coming out of college. Because I was teaching as an adjunct professor at the time at Temple University. And I'm looking at all of this and I'm like, okay, there has to be a way that people can continue the important work of journalism and still be able to put a roof over their heads. And I started looking at, I was taking a course in graduate school at Temple where you had to do a business plan. And I'm looking at my business plan. I'm like, okay, this is all kinds of, this shows this is the first one of these I've ever done. It's kind of obvious. But it made me think that you have to, I can structure myself like a business and still go out and tell stories. And also, because I'm doing the kind of things that I think are important, I can also preserve my mental health. So that's when I decided that, I'm not going to specifically work for anybody anymore, for just one place. But in a lot of ways, I'm a lot happier. There are times where it's feast or famine, but I'm a lot happier because I'm telling the stories that I want to tell, and I'm telling them to the people that I think need to hear them.
And that is a perfect segue to my next question. Um, So I know when I started, I didn't know about taxes. I didn't know about structures. I just fell into it, and that cost me a lot of money. So I want you all to just briefly talk about the learning curve that you experienced when you were setting up your business, including taxes, accounting, and all the systems you need to keep you organized.
Like you said, there was a learning curve and there was no playbook that I could find. Not having that business background initially. So, it was literally just talking to people. I went to SCORE. I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but yeah, so SCORE is, I think most cities have it. It's a nonprofit. They provide free or low cost workshops around business. And a lot of like older white people who have retired or sold off their businesses volunteer their time and they sit down with you, and they sat down with me to look over my business plan, to talk about audience, all these things that I had no idea where to begin. They actually led me to some clients as well. So I would say tap into the resources that you have locally for sure, like your business chamber of commerce. And there's just so many more resources on the journalism side that weren't available when I was starting. The Institute for Independent Journalists, they have a free freelance start guide, literally for free, that you can tap into. And we have the link. I know that Auntie Benet will share. But yeah, it was really, it took years to really get it together. I'm still learning, of course, but I would say take advantage of all the free resources you can. But eventually, maybe you want to look into a business coach. But again, tap into the free stuff first.
I would say it's different when in the broadcast, specifically television and radio space, where you're sort of, I would say, was like what, and Shernay, correct me if I'm wrong, that's like per diem, or you're like sort of at will. So I think when I was freelancing in the television space, was more so like letting the manager, whether that's like the EP who's in charge of freelancers or the news director, assistant news director, saying, hey, like I'm available on like this set of hours, like this week, or I can do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I can't do Thursday, Friday, or you let them know your set availability of the week. And then they'll also say, hey, like we have somebody that's going on vacation for, that's working the weekend shift. Can you work that? And then obviously it's like you're working under their systems and doing the time card. And instead of you getting a W-2, you'll get sort of the freelancer itemized form. So it was easier for me to track in terms of like the systems and saying, hey, I've worked this, these hours, or I did this, or I worked this shift. So it's easier for me to track based off of their systems. But knowing how to negotiate, for me, knowing how to negotiate the hourly rate for freelancers was something that I felt like I lost all the money on the table when I was doing this in grad school. I was like, wait, I can definitely ask for more. I don't have to go through that specific range. And knowing how I had experience in other mediums, other platforms, was something that I got on pretty quickly. I was like, oh wait, like you're getting paid this amount as a freelancer, and I'm getting paid this amount. So I quickly learned as a freelancer how to negotiate my worth, which also translated for me when I was applying for my first job and second job, third job, etc., how to negotiate your salaries. I think being a freelancer or independent journalist teaches you a lot of ways on different skills to pick up on. So if you do decide to go back in the full-time saddle, you will know how to, one, negotiate your worth, and two, knowing how to really advocate for yourself in other ways outside of the entrepreneurial or the financial side. But definitely that was something that I felt like I lost a lot of money on the table. I was like, wait, I definitely could be making this amount of money versus this. And so I, thinking back on it, I was like, well, I could do this with this money. I could do that. I could have done this. So, live in the past, what you live and learn, but definitely is something that, no, like Shernay was saying, there's no playbook, but now we're giving you the tools on how to do said things. But definitely that was something that I felt that I would had a learning curve on, was the negotiating part for the rate as a freelancer.
The first, I was trying to do my first set of income, my first income tax return as an independent journalist was when I knew when I found out what I didn't know. If you get nothing else from me this entire webinar, understand that you do not take your taxes as an independent journalism to H&R Block. Just don't do it. I made that mistake, and first of all, H&R Block does not necessarily employ accountants. And because they don't employ accountants, they don't know the specialized way that you have to set yourself up as an independent. How much do you spend on paper? Did you go to a conference this year? What did you spend on going to and from assignments? When I cover like the Democratic and Republican national conventions, I have to do an initial outlay from my own pocket that then gets reimbursed to me, but I am able to claim on my taxes. And the folks at H&R Block don't necessarily know that. So if you get nothing else out of that, do not go to H&R Block to get your taxes done. But get an accountant. In fact, get yourself an accountant, a lawyer, if you can afford one. There are places like the bar associations will help you out with that. Um, Make sure you have someone who can help you out with insurance for yourself. Fortunately, Hall Monitor, which I co-own, does have insurance, but I also have insurance for myself because when you cover politics, people are kind of litigious sometimes. And because of that, they throw the word lawsuit in your face, and you want to make sure that you're prepared. So probably the biggest learning curve I had was finding out what I didn't know and building a team to help me put it together.
And I
Okay.
want to add real quick, for accounting throughout the year, because you pay your tax person at the end, but accounting throughout the year is important. Like she's saying, keeping track of the conferences. If you're having meetings with clients, you can write that off. So that's why it's so important to get with a tax person that knows the business side of things. But for throughout the year, I'm using QuickBooks Solopreneur.
Mhm.
It's very simple. They have an app. I can track my mileage if I'm driving to teach at the university or wherever I'm going, meeting with the client or shooting a story. I'm tracking my mileage, and so that's a quick app. It's low cost. There's also Wave. Wave is another one that's actually free. So yeah, just take advantage of these freemium apps that are out there to make life easier for you.
Okay, thank you. So, you mentioned this, Shernay, and everybody's mentioned this about how we as freelancers cherish the independence, but we also have to write for the clients that we have and find new ones to keep the money coming in, the multiple income streams. So, what do you all do to kind of strike that balance of serving the clients that you have, but also trying to get more clients? And how does that routine look for you?
Well, for me, I I have a couple of like long-standing clients that I do stuff for on a pretty regular basis. But because the things I do for them are usually like Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, that leaves me Tuesdays and Fridays to pitch. And I still pitch things to people. I have if you're coming from a traditional newsroom as an independent, always, always, always stay in touch with your contacts. Not just because they may funnel work at whatever news organization they're at to you, but because they can also tell you who else is looking for something that you do. And like I said, I cover a lot of political conventions. And because of that, I send feelers out to people so I can give as many, stories to different, areas of the country as I possibly can. That way I'm getting the most bang for my buck, and they're getting a service that they might not be able to have because they're a small paper or a small radio station or a small television station. But you have to set up a schedule that allows you to not only fulfill what you're supposed to do for your clients, but also do some other things that you might find interesting. And, working from home, and I hope we kind of touch on this later. Sometimes working from home is not the best place to do that because you have people when you're working from home that sometimes forget that you're working. They just see you as being at home. So if you have a co-working space that you can access, or in my case, we're trying to find a small office in Philadelphia City Hall that will let us just go in there and work. If you can find that space, even if it's just your local coffee shop, it gets you out of the house, and it also kind of reminds the people in your life who see you working from home that, okay, when I'm at my desk at home, I'm not just hanging out eating bonbons. I'm working. So that kind of helps me when I'm trying to, get my schedule together.
I agree with that. I have found that my schedule can shift based on what's happening in my life at the time and the type of work that I'm pursuing as well. And then you also have to just think about when you're the most productive, because since we set our own schedules, we get to decide when we work, but we do need to set a schedule for ourselves. And so it's good to think about, okay, when am I at my peak? When do I feel the most productive to get some things done? Because those 3 or 4 hours, that's the time I need to be writing, or that's the time I need to be thinking about proposals or whatever it is. And then the other times I could be doing some things that are a little, lighter, maybe just emails. But you want to think about your own energy shifts and then what your life looks like. So I had to pick up my kids, right? So 2:30, 3 o'clock, I already know I'm not going to be scheduling meetings at that time. Pretty much the rest of the day, if I do anything, it needs to be lighter work. I need my heavier work to happen earlier in the day, is all my meetings. And so realizing that you have the control to set your schedule, and so set it in a way that's going to leave you to be the most productive. And you have to find that time to market and pitch yourself. And it can be challenging. It's something that I continue to work at. And I think it's helpful to every quarter to think about what's working and what's not. So I've been doing it this way for a while. Is that really working? Have I been putting off the things I need to be putting off? Like I need to update my website. That's one thing I need to be focused on. I'm going to do that on Monday. But yeah, so you always want to continuously reevaluate how you are structuring yourself to make sure that you're doing all that you need to do.
Okay. All right. Let's talk money. Okay. So, my question, I mean, I've always been blessed because I write about a niche topic, aviation. So, I have never had problems making that money. But there are a lot of people who are in verticals that are kind of full, like sports, arts and entertainment, politics, So, how do you find the outlets that pay independent journalists in verticals that tend to have a lot of people covering them already?
That's a good question. I when back when I was in the freelance game, I would say it because now I guess it's totally different. Everybody is like what Denise was saying earlier, like everybody is, we're experiencing a, slew of layoffs, and there's layoffs left and right, and everybody's, gunning for the same positions or freelancing for the same outlets or doing the same thing. So it's kind of hard to differentiate yourself knowing that everybody's doing it, but I think it's a skill what I was doing, and I brought to the table saying, hey, like I can tell this story in multiple different ways. Like, yes, like we're covering politics or we're covering breaking news, but I can also, file a 500, 600 digital story, but I can also turn that into a Twitter thread. I can also do a Facebook Live or Ask Me Anything. I can do vertical videos before vertical videos were, everybody's doing them now. But back then it was sort of, a new thing. So I'm able to tell the story a different way and to get the eyeballs across. So that was my selling point, and I was able to get more money because of me not being a one-trick pony. I was able to do a lot of those different things that, they taught us, in journalism school, and they beat us over the head with this, like, you need to be a multimedia journalist, or I guess I call it multi-skilled journalist. You need to be multi-platform and do all these things. I'm like, okay, I'm doing it, but you need to pay me my money appropriately on being able to be a multi-platform journalist. If I'm able to shoot, edit, report, write, distribute across multiple platforms, I'm able to do that, but you need to pay me my money. So the going rate for me when walking and doing a lot of, whether it was like freelance producing, freelance writing, it's like, hey, I can do this, but throw me extra money, extra coins, because I'm able to tell the story across multiple platforms and it lives longer versus just on the site. It can live on social media, and it can be able to be a talking point discussion of, doing a lot of that social listening that we're taught, how we find story ideas or how we find sort of those day two stories on day one. So we're able to do a lot of that content, but it starts with being able to showcase your skills. So I was able to saying, hey, I can tell a story 5 different ways, whether it's politics, journal assignments, sports, etc. I'm able to be more conversational, but also reach the audiences where they're at. Because unfortunately, audiences are getting younger, not older. So you have to be able to meet the audience, and that's most likely on your smartphone on social media. So you're able to distribute that content, but you have to be able to have those social savvy skills while still being a journalist, but being able to tell the story in a way that is conversational and reaches the audience.
Yeah, I would say you have to tap into what your unique strengths are that you bring to the table. That may take some reflection, just really sitting down, okay, what do I bring that's unique? And of course, each story and each outlet is going to be different. And so thinking about, okay, what does this outlet typically do? What can I bring that is a unique edge that they would benefit from, that their audience would be interested in? And of course, that takes time to do. But I would say to do that route, I always tell people to look locally as well, especially if you're willing to take a little bit less, because local outlets may not have the money, but they obviously may not have the staff, right? So they may be open to freelancers. That's another option. I say building relationships, and I feel like I say this all the time. People may be annoyed by the networking conversation, but really, none of the opportunities that I have right now, I've gotten from a job board or a LinkedIn job post. It's from the connections that I've made. It's reconnecting with people, checking in. It's seeing, okay, even if there is a job posting, who do I know at this place that can get me in there? That's really the way to get around it these days, is figuring out your unique sauce, and making those connections with people, and then looking locally. I would say those are the main things, and asking for referrals, conferences. Even though you may be thinking, okay, I want to be a freelancer, and a lot of these conferences are focused on finding full-time employees. I still have gone and said, are you looking for freelancers at all? How can I support you? Is there a need within your organization for this area that I want to focus on? So don't be afraid to think outside the box.
To piggyback on what Shanae said, connections are important, really, really important. And you don't, until until you find yourself in a position where you're like, okay, well, I need some work, you don't know who knows who you know. And if someone likes you and likes your work and likes your work ethic, they may not have something directly for you, but they may recommend you to someone else. So that's important. Also, I do a lot of editing these days. Um, and particularly on the print side, it's amazing how much editing people need, particularly since everybody's writing a book. And once people figure out that you edit books, they come to you. But I tell them, look, this is my price for the amount of work that you are going to ask me to do to make this book readable, this is my price. And you can pay that price or you cannot pay that price, but I am not coming down from that price. And I took that attitude from the first book I ever edited. This gentleman who was like a leader in the civil rights movement here in Philadelphia came into my office with a shopping bag filled with manila folders. The folders each had typewritten pages that he wanted me to edit for his book. Now, before I even could start the editing process, I had to put this on some sort of computerized thing that I could then send to his editor. So this editor didn't, the publisher at the publishing house didn't call me up and say, what in the world is wrong with you? So I had to do that additional work. And then I had to edit the book on top of it. And you know how they say you should write how you talk? That does not apply to everybody, I am here to say. So you had those three components going on at the same time. And I'm editing this book and I get it done and I look at how much time and effort I put into it and look at how much I said I'd do it for. And it was too late for me to change my price because I had already agreed to this price with this person. But the one thing I learned from that is I'm not going to agree to that price anymore without looking at everything that this project entails. And sometimes you got to tell people today's price is not yesterday's price. You're going to have to, if you want me to do all of this, you got to have my money. And I'm not backing down from that.
Okay. All right. So, rejections. Okay. This is a natural part of the business. And before I finish this thought, if you all have questions, please drop them in the Q&A. We're going to have some time in a few minutes to answer your questions about independent and freelance journalism. So rejections, how do you keep it moving after a pitch isn't successful? Or how do you reshape it? What do you do after you get a rejection?
You shop it around to somebody else. I would say, like when I was freelancing in print years ago, I would say, hey, like this is a topic that, I can write on. I have these sources, do the whole 9 yards of the pitch. Somebody say, oh, well, no, this is what we're looking for. I'm like, all right, well, take it, and then you go down the line. I just keep moving. I mean, all it takes is just that one yes to get the green light and to keep it moving. So regardless, and what we talk a lot about in this panel, this seminar is about networking. Use your network, rely on your network. I know if I have a pitch and I know somebody's connected to somebody that used to work at said place, I said, hey, like, do you have the contact information for the editor for freelancers, or what's the best email contact information? Just go down the line using your network. If somebody knows somebody that went to school with somebody, or you went to J school with somebody that freelanced at this place, I was able to rely on my connections and my Rolodex to get the stories out. But if one person said no, it's like, listen, this story might not be your cup of tea, but somebody's going to read it eventually. So I kept it moving and just went down the line. So eventually I got that one yes, but I know it's not always that easy when it comes to the pitching and the get the denial. So it's a lot more from what I've seen, it's a lot more no's now. But back when I was doing the print version or the print side of independent journalism, just go down the line, just use your Rolodex. And even if it's something that if you get a whole bunch of no's and you're seeing like, okay, well, nobody wants this, then go back in the lab or go back in the booth and sort of retool that pitch. Or if it's something that eventually will not be as newsy, see if you can find another news peg, retool it, and then shop it back out. So it's a matter of you just have to have that hustle to do it. I mean, one no, you just need that one yes to get off the ground.
Well, I've been fortunate in that I haven't had like a tremendous amount of rejections, but I've had enough of them to where I recognize one of two things. Either there's something I didn't include in the pitch, or I send it to the wrong person. And that happens. And I have to agree with Jonathan. You just have to pitch it to the next person. Or if that story isn't going to pan out, it's the way that you handle the rejection. If you handle it by like totally going off on somebody, you just may as well never reach out to that person again, because they're going to remember how you responded to that. But if you say, well, thank you, how can I improve upon this? Or what else, what kind of things do you all take? What kind of stories are you interested in? You try to take your rejections and turn them into potential yeses by saying to people, okay, I couldn't give this to you now. This wasn't something that you wanted or needed, but what do you need? And how can I get it to you?
Okay. Well, we are stacking up with questions, so I'm going to save our last question as closing remarks, and I want to jump right into the questions. And let's do kind of a speed round so we can answer as many as possible. So the first question is, do media outlets want freelancers to cover hard or soft news?
Yes. That's the only way, because the same people that have me covering city council, the congressional races and stuff like that are the same people that have me at the women's luncheons where they're honoring Tamron Hall and doing movie, food, and book reviews. Um, if nothing else, being an independent requires a level of flexibility that you're not going to have for anything else. Basically, if you tell me what the assignment is, I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to study what it is I'm going to cover. I'm going to go out, I'm going to ask the right questions. I'm going to cover that thing. So, yeah, they want hard and soft news. And sometimes I even get to do sports every once in a while. So, it's about so yes, they want it all.
Okay. Next question. How can we find outlets that pay us $100 plus for a story or have or contracts? I'm tired of getting paid $50 for a 500-word story.
There's a site that you should look into. It's called Who Pays Writers? And that's a good way to see who's paying what. And then okay, they don't pay enough. Don't even bother pitching to them. But that way you can see who is actually paying the money. And I know I already plugged the Institute for Independent Journalists, but we have a podcast where we're talking to editors and we're always asking, how much are you paying freelancers? So looking for any type of transparency like that is going to be the way to go.
Okay. Next question. Do you use an online portfolio and has it been helpful in getting gigs or opportunities? I'm also curious to hear what are best practices you recommend for building one that's effective.
I know Muckrack is a good website to use, muckrack.com. So you can take the URL of the published clip, or even if it's like a PDF, and you can make your own, like claim your own URL, like like mine is muckrack.com/that's Johnny Franks. You can claim that, upload all of your clips, and they show up as different, like the link shows up as like the preview, and it makes it more user friendly. So if you're shopping out your portfolio to people you're trying to freelance for, or even trying to get a full-time gig to show that you're published, most likely that's an easier link to use to put into the application that says like, oh, show us you have any updated clips. Just pop that, and then people can just go and look and see the different clips. So you can also sort it by different categories, whether you cover crime or politics or arts and entertainment and sports. It's very user friendly. And also, I see a lot of people, in addition to Muckrack, have like Bitly pages or other type of like short URLs to put in their like Instagram bio. You click it and it has like all their published links, so it can be in one readily available place. But I know Muckrack is a very user-friendly website to use for freelancers or for those who are working in legacy media, and also it auto populates as well. So if you like, you can there's a way in the website that you can plug in the back end, like it can aggregate your name and from pull from different sites and it auto populates. So it's very user friendly. You can walk through all the steps, but muckrock.com is a very um, tool that a lot of people use.
You're muted, but
This one's for you, Denise. How do you set your book editing rate? By the word, by the hour, by project?
I've started doing it by project because if you hand me like a 500 word essay or a 500 like I just wrote a children's book. If you hand me a children's book and it's maybe like 3,000 words and all I'm really doing is editing for a little editing for content and just making sure your subjects and verbs agree, then that's one price. But if you hand me this children's book and I'm practically rewriting it for you because it is in that bad of shape, then we're going to have to go a little higher. I was asked to edit a biography for someone who a former reality show contestant of all things. And when he showed me the book, I was like, bidding starts at $3,000. And he was like, well, why are you asking for so much? I said, because first I have to read your copy. Then I have to take a look at the content. Then I have to make sure that your subjects and verbs agree. Then I have to make sure that it's fact checked. There are a lot of steps here. And I'm not doing those steps for less than $3,000. And I found that once I started charging a little more for that, I got people who, for one of what, I'm old, so you're going to hear phrases from me that would indicate I'm old. People will come correct because if you're gonna ask me to take time out of running my business, hosting the city council live broadcast, and doing all these other myriad things I do, you're gonna have to pay me for that time. So if you are doing book editing, like I said, I look at the project because if you go with just the words, and that you might have an issue with the words, but if you go with the project itself, you're encompassing everything. You're basically saying, this is all I am going to need to do to make this project a good project. So please pay me accordingly for that.
Okay. We've got a lot of questions, so I need y'all to keep count. We're going to do speed round, keep it brief. How do you handle healthcare as a freelancer?
I got married.
I was about to say the same thing. Having a partner, I'm not gonna lie,
Obamacare.
or
Too
Obamacare.
expensive.
Yeah,
Okay. Next, what type of statistics and analytics should you pull when showing off your multi-platform journalism skills? Should you pull engagement, interactions, etc.?
definitely.
Yeah, definitely the engagement. Definitely, if you can pull the specific data from Chartbeat, this isn't an ad, but from Chartbeat or from any of the metrics from like Meta, or I think you can still do it with Twitter or X or whatever they call it now. You can still pull the specific data metrics from the specific post, but I know chartbeat.com, there's a way that you can get access as a freelancer. You can set up the tools and bells and whistles for it, but you can get the data analytics and story analytics behind the specific links for the specific outlet that you write for, and you'll be able to make yourself more marketable by saying like, oh, this hit, 600 page views, 600,000 page views, or this hit 1.2 million page views in the last, 4 or 5 months. So definitely lead with analytics and data because that will get you more forward-facing opportunities.
Okay. Talk about LLC versus sole proprietorship when setting up your business.
So you can automatically be a sole proprietor as a freelance without doing anything. And the LLC is when you want to take that extra step and form a structure with your state. Typically it costs, well, in Maryland, I think it's a couple $100, I think, to form that. And then the benefits, of course, is that you have the LLC with your name. It's easier when you want to hire people. You have, more structure around it. It's also your liability is different, right? So if somebody sues you because if you're reporting in some way, they could take the money from the LLC and not your personal money. So it has that legal protection there for you. But I would say if you're just getting started with freelancing, don't even worry about that. Don't let that hold you up. Just get started and you're automatically going to be a sole proprietor.
Next, this happens a lot. I pitched an idea once and was surprised to see it in the publication a few weeks later, directly connected to the person who I had chatted with the pitch. How often does this thing happen and what can you do about it?
A lot more often than we talk about.
Mhm.
And I found, I'm like, okay, you did that. Guess who doesn't get another idea from me? But when you are making a pitch, don't send everything. Don't send all of the nuts and bolts of your story. Send just enough to wet their whistle. Because if they don't have everything you have, they can't take your idea.
Okay. We've got somebody who's a PR person who's considering doing freelance writing. What should she think about when pricing her services?
Um, so I'm guessing like freelance writing for websites or for organizations. I'm guessing we can't get clarity. But I would have a discovery call with the organization. So I'll first make that initial contact with the company that you want to work with and set up a discovery call. And again, frame it as how can I best support you? Writing is one of my offerings. Would that be beneficial for you? Do you have a budget for that? So I always try to get their budget first and then take some time to think about it. Because like Denise said, you want to take some time and think, okay, how long is it actually going to take me to do this? Factoring in the research that needs to go into it, how much time I need to write and edit myself and then come up with a plan to pitch it to them. So it'll really vary. And that's a longer conversation. We got to keep it short, but hopefully that's enough to get you started.
Okay. What's the appropriate time to follow up after sending a pitch?
If it's a timely story, if it's something that like you're pitching this on a Monday and the event is like on a Friday, sooner rather than later. But if it's something that is more of a feature story and you pitched it, let's say on a Tuesday, you don't hear back by the end of the week, I would say Monday, early Tuesday. Give it a couple of days. I mean, it also depends on just the news cycle. We're dealing with unprecedented times. Like it's crazy everywhere. So like people are dealing with a lot, but also being cognizant because like this is your money, this is your way of living. You're trying to, get that check because again, the bills don't pay themselves, so you have to sort of have that hustle. So I would say a couple of days you have to sort of follow back up. Yep. And for me, it always depends on the story that I am covering. If it's something that is more like a hard news, we're running up on a deadline, it's as timely, I will, be in your inbox like I'm trying to sell you something. Like, hey, like I'm just checking in, or hey, I will like pick up the phone and call, send an email saying, hey, I just gave you a call, following up an email. But if it's something that's more of like a enterprise featuring piece, I usually would give it a week or so to follow up. If I don't hear anything back from that, I take my idea and shop it around elsewhere for somebody who can value my time and will pay me appropriately.
And quick add, if this is a large publication and the editor has been quoted, try to see if they already talked about it and how frequently they want people to follow up with them. Because sometimes they're going to on these podcasts and they're saying, okay, I prefer if people follow up with me in a week or two. So do a quick Google search to see if they've already discussed this and shared it somewhere.
Okay, the AI question. I was hoping somebody would ask. How do you factor AI as a tool in seeking freelance opportunities, helping you organize yourself? And when you use it, do you disclose it to your clients?
The only AI I really use is Grammarly. And that's because while I've been writing for years and I'm an editor, I sometimes forget, you know, where to put the period or where to put the comma, and it helps me out in that regard. I'm too big a fan of my ability to write to use like Chat GBT to write for me. I'm just